Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of Beyond Mirage. Today, we have with us Abhijeet Kini sir, who is an illustrator, a comic creator, and if you have been to Comic Con, then definitely you would have interacted with him, or at least would have seen his face over there. And I'm 100% sure about that. And I'm really grateful for this, sir, and thank you for joining us today.
A complete pleasure, Jay. Thank you so much for having me. Always nice to interact, and it's always nice to hear that there is some connection in comics and Comic Con somewhere or the other. So always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Great, great, great. So, sir, most of the people would definitely know you, but for some people or some listeners over here who do not know you, can you please give a short introduction of yourself?
Yeah. So I've been a cartoonist at core right from my childhood days, and my first professional published cartoon work started when I was in college in 1999. I was with Midday. I was freelancing with them, interning with them. So my work in cartooning has been on for a while now, but my first love was always comics. So I was very happy to get a chance to draw for Tinkle Comics in 2004, and I've been drawing for them ever since. And along the way, I've been into animation, I've been into design, and now we had a setup called Kini Studios that I and my wife run, and that is how at Comic Con we get to launch new comics which we publish ourselves, along with merchandise, collectibles, artworks, etc., etc. So this is the domain I'm into, and I comics is what I totally love to talk about. So here I am.
Great, great. So, how did your journey start? Like, when did you feel that you want to go into this? Because this is something really cool also at the outside, and it's completely different and unique. So, when did you feel that?
Yes. So it would be my childhood itself when I decided I really wanted to be a cartoonist, a published cartoonist. I wanted to make comics. So it was my childhood dream for sure. I was exposed to comics when I was probably 6 years old, five,
Okay.
6 years old. And I started loving the medium. I loved comics, the kind of expressions, the panels, the stories. So I think my ambition was to be a comic artist. Although, like you just said, and talking, I'm an 80s born guy. So looking at the mid to late 80s and 90s, these professions were really not seen as, is it safe, is it not, the mainstream was where it was. It's only now, today's times, that you get all these alternate careers and people do so well in them. But I was very fortunate. I'm very fortunate that my parents supported my dreams, and they encouraged me. They said that if this is what you want to be, we will make sure that we will encourage you, we will give you all the support. So so while in school itself, I used to dabble, I used to doodle, I used to make small comic strips and enter competitions, which, by the way, in school competitions I never won first prize and all, because I always used
Okay.
to draw cartoons and comics in it, and people used to be like, this is not art. But that's what I love to do. And So childhood wise, I think I was, you can say it was a childhood dream. But the way it actually happened was, maybe being at the right place at the right time, networking well, whatever you want to call it. um, Tinkle, I went to the Tinkle office. My mom had taken me to the Tinkle office when I was in class 9, to just show my work. And I was such a fan of Tinkle, and the late Uncle Pai, the great Uncle Pai was there. And my jaw had dropped. I was in school, and he said that, okay, you're still in school, but once you grow up and once you're done with your education, you can come back and try and all that. He had given me a small story to draw, which I did, but of course, I was again in ninth standard. So 2004, after my college, after my animation course, after everything, I went back again with my portfolio, and that's how I started with Tinkle. So, long story short, it was my childhood dream come true, and I'm one of the lucky few who can say that they turned their hobby into their bread butter earning profession.
Great, great. So, and I personally believe that every piece of art has a lot of investment of time and energy into it. So, can you please take us to the process of creating a comic,
Absolutely.
and how much time do you invest in that?
Comic creation, see, it's two, you can look at it two ways. One is if it's a commissioned piece, like for example, what I draw for Tinkle, it's commissioned. So I'm on contract with them. So they send me the stories and I draw for them. So what happens is the writers, the script writers, they get together, they brainstorm, they write the story down, then they break it up into a panel based script. Like, first the essay is written and then it is broken down into panel one, panel two, panel three. Then it comes to me in Word format, which I have to read, and then I have to start imagining, okay, this panel will be long, this panel will be a close up, this panel will be this, that. And then I have to start making the rough thumbnails, a storyboard, very rough. That is then approved. Once it is approved, then I have to start inking it. Inking is the process where you apply the black inks to pencils. That is if you're drawing it on paper. If you're doing it digitally, then you make a new layer and you draw properly on it. That is approved again, and then you color it. Then the final files go to them. They then apply the text layers and the dialogues. We have to keep space for it. We have to make sure that if it's a long big dialogue, then there has to be space in the panel for it. The letterist puts all the letters and the dialogues, and that's how the full comic page is made from scratch. The second way is when you are working on it on your own, just like I would for a comic like Angry Maushi, which I myself write, draw, and publish. So in that, I have a rough idea, which I again write down. I may just skip a couple of steps there because I am writing it myself, so I can actually go impromptu with it. And I sometimes directly draw in color. I don't thumbnail it because I have the idea in mind. So there are two ways to do it. Either it's your own stuff, which you're really free to go about how you want it, or if it's a commissioned piece, then there is a proper process that one has to follow. And this is like a universal thing. Even your DC, Marvel, they follow the same rules.
Okay, got it, got it. So, as you said about the idea creation and the creativity aspect, so comics is something which require a lot of creativity because that each character is different, that each hair is
Yeah.
different in a different manner, and
Yeah.
and it requires a lot of open-mindedness. And over a
Mm-hmm.
period of time, if we see as we grow in our life, our mind creates certain patterns, and we tend to
Mm.
follow those patterns only while taking certain decisions in our life.
Mm.
But this profession or
Right.
this kind of work will require a lot of creativity and open-mindedness. So how do you manage to break the mental patterns in mind and have that open-minded attitude towards everything?
That's a good question. I have never heard this question before, and I really like the direction with this. It's actually tricky, and you're right, because as we grow up, we become a little rigid with a few things. No matter what you are into, even if you're a banker, even if you're an artist, even if you're a musician, you will still have preset notions which are like built through the years. So when it comes to creativity and you have to create something out of the ordinary every time because expectations are like that, you have to always make sure that you keep your eyes and ears open and keep observing things. This is one very important rule for any creative person, not just artists. It can be anyone who wants to get into creativity. Observation. The more you observe, the more you store. I call this a 1 TB hard drive. So you store all the data here and you always use that data later on. So for example, if I'm drawing something based on Mumbai, I love drawing Mumbai in my, comics or cartoons or whatever. So I always look out, what kind of characters are there. If you just step out on the streets, especially in the pre-COVID days, you would find so many interesting characters in Mumbai, just a stroll down Kolaba and you will see hundreds of specimens right there. So you always have to observe and keep all these things in mind so that tomorrow, if you have to draw something based on these ideas, you already have something that you have stored. So no matter what your thinking might be, no matter what your preset notions might be, when it is about creativity, when it is about creating something out of nothing, then you have to go back to your observational skills. So I think that keeps our thought processes ticking, and you don't get I won't say you won't get stuck. You will get stuck. There will be an artist block. There will be a time where you'll be frustrated. कि यार idea नहीं आ रहा है. No matter how much I think. But observational skills is always important. So even if you can't step out on the street, you can always just Google. I mean, just look at things. Look at YouTube videos. It need not be anything meaningful. It can just be anything. Just look at them. Look at how people behave. Look at how people react. That is where your expressions come from. That is where your narratives come from, etc., etc. So I think that will be my 2 cents on this.
Okay. So you just need to observe the things without actually
Yeah.
say putting a tag on it. कि ये तो ऐसा ही
Correct.
है
Correct.
या ये
Correct.
तो वैसा ही है,
Correct.
something like that.
Correct. It's just like your Google Photos, It just accumulates banks and banks of tags. So if you're just going through your Google Photos, you'll be surprised. Oh, there's a tag called cats. I didn't even know I clicked cats in my album, and it's showing me all the cats that I have in my photos. You might not realize it, but it's getting stored. So always observe and keep those things in mind.
Right. And as you said that you are an 80s kid, and there was an era in 80s and 90s there when comics was a boom. Okay, and it was a really great era to say read comics, and that was a content consumption kind of thing. And so after that, say social media took over, TV series took over, OTT platforms took over. So what do you think, like why there is a shift, and in today's time, how you or one can actually use comic as a piece of content and drive the audience to consume such kind of content and drive them into reading and stuff?
See, I think every era, and I must say 80s and 90s was a fantastic time to be in any which way. Things were simpler and nicer. You beat music, beat movies. Well, I won't say Bollywood movies because I know a lot of crash films also came out that time. But comics had a boom that time. And every era has its own medium, media platforms that come and go. The VCR once upon a time was the in thing, the video cassettes, which now, of course, compact discs were another one. Your iPods were a thing in the early 2000s. Now it's just the phone. The smartphone has everything on it. So in times like these, when people's attention spans are also so limited, that various platforms are changing. They have to keep evolving. Like you just said, OTT. Who would have thought, in the early 2000s, that you'll be able to see movies on the internet? Because back then, saving a simple JPEG used to be like a 5-minute process.
Right.
We could see it load like this, and then we had to right click and save as well. So war times ka ye, and today OTT is like, it's a basic thing, So in times like these, comics, although it's published on different platforms, like for example, it might not just be in print, it has e-comics now, it has animated comics now. You must check out the Watchmen animated comics, the animated comic on YouTube. You can just look it up on YouTube. They have actually animated the entire comic as an animatic, and it looks with voiceovers. It's beautiful. So they have enhanced the comic going with technology that is available, and I think we have to stay relevant that way. As far as I'm concerned, a lot of our clients today have, marketing budgets keeping comics in mind. So a lot of brands that we work with use comics for advertising. They use comics for brochures. They use comics for, brand communication, gifting, whatever it might be. So they also know the power of the medium. It's just that it might not be on a printed 4-page comic book. It might just be on the internet. It might just be a swipeable Insta post. I mean, we all do that, right? Instagram has swipeable posts, which are pretty much like how a comic works. They have dialogue bubbles, and then you have panels. So I think the times we live in, the technology that is available drives the fact that you always need to keep evolving. And comics as a medium is here to stay. My only thing is it might not remain the comic book. It might just become a post, or it might just become a video that you scroll and watch, an animated comic video. So that's my point about this. But staying relevant is important. So if you're an artist, you have to be visually compelling, no matter which platform you're, creating stuff for. And if you're a writer, equally so. So I would say that would be my answer to it.
Right, right, right. And why do you think, sir, that there is a lot of difference between the Indian comics and the Western comics? Like, why they are so much popular? And if you even compare Japanese manga, then it's
See, it has a lot to do with the history of all these comic, publishers and where they come from. So I do take a subject called History of Comics at Whistling Woods, and it's very interesting because see, these comics, especially your DCs and your Marvels, have already had like 75, 80 years of existence today. And they've had so much time to establish themselves, reinvent, go in losses, come back, make movies, blah blah blah. So they've got a lot of time. Here we don't have that. Uh, what do you call it? Cultural impact as much as they have, because most of their comics came up during the World War time. They wanted patriotism being talked about in comics. They wanted heroes to stand for the American way, etc., etc. So, which is why most of the comic heroes, the American ones, would always have a red and blue color combination. Superman, Spider-Man, Captain America, they always have the American flag colors. So a lot of those points drove sales, back then. And once you have something as established as those characters, you can't let go, so even manga, by the way, has roots in World War, because that was a time when the Japanese were introduced to American content like Disney and all, and then the Japanese artists started drawing. Few of them started drawing in that style, and they were influenced by that kind of cuteness, those kind of eyes and those kind of faces. That is how the early influences of manga also began. So it has a lot to do with history. And here in India, of course, we've had our own history, to our country, and which is why most of the comics we have and we know today are your Amar Chitra Kathas, which stand for history of India, which stand for the mythology aspect of India. I always take Amar Chitra Katha as what India stands. So if manga is to Japan, ACK is to India, is what I would say. Similarly, we had Chacha Chaudhary. We had superheroes like Shaktiman, was so wildly popular. We've had, but only thing is maybe we haven't had that much time as your DC and Marvel to establish, and probably the whole Bollywood aspect of India takes center stage. So everything just revolves around it,
right.
So if something is being done in Bollywood, we'll cover it more, more than maybe say a comics platform. So India has had its history of comics, but not as culturally whatever as maybe your DC and Marvel. But I think that might be the reason why the whole time span,
Got it.
70, 80 years is a lot to establish your comics.
Right.
We are relatively new.
So talking about the characters, sir, how was Angry Maushi won?
Angry Maushi, I had participated in the Mumbai Comic Con for the first time in 2011. So we were discussing, kya rakhenge stall pe, what kind of artworks. So it has to be Bombay, right? Because we are from Mumbai and it has to be something related to the city. So I just made a face, this bindi and this angry woman. It reminded me of any day you walk down the street or your railway station, you'll always find this angry auntie, Maushi, who's screaming in Marathi and, telling you to get out of her way and all that. She can be anyone. She can be a Kolini, she can be a maid servant, she can be a lady who stays next door to you, anyone. But it's a very typical Mumbai thing, Maharashtrian thing. She'll have like a nut and a Nawari sari. So we made that design as a poster and a coaster and all that. And people were like, oh, who's this character? Who's this angry Maushi? I was like, people are asking about her. So which means that they like her. And then we decided that, let's come up with a comic series. Let's give her a story, a backstory, and come up with a comic series. And we launched the first comic in 2012. So she appeared first in 11, but the comic came in 12. And I'm pretty happy that we've got a little cult following for Angry Maushi today. And it's an adult comic. It's a socio-political satire. So Definitely not for kids. It has a lot of graphic violence and themes which are very mature. But it's still a comedy, and it's still an Indian superheroine who does not wear spandex and wears a Nawari sari. So I think that's how Maushi was born.
Right, right, right. And sir, I got to ask you this: like, uh, any piece of content anyone creates wants to give out certain message uh, in the public. So, and right now,
Hmm.
currently, humor is something which is like
Hmm.
at its peak. Like we can see memes and those kind of content which is being shared on social media. So, how do you
Right.
integrate humor with comics to actually give a social message out?
To me, nothing works as well as humor does. Serious stuff also can be told in a particular way without being offensive or without being vulgar or something, and still make sure people get it. So satire is something which is very effective, especially in the political or social scenario. So if there's any message you want to send out and you don't want to make it sound serious or preachy, you have to make it satirical. So always look on the funny side of things. Funny means it might not be funny like, haha, look, that looks hilarious because that guy looks funny. It's not that. Look at the whole repercussions of the issue. Look at the whole backlashes. Look at the sarcasm behind particular things that people say. That becomes a joke. So most of the times, our politicians give us enough material to make fun of, and I think that is the main job of a politician, to make people aware of how stupid they are. So political jokes always would be there. You just open Twitter and the kind of venom you will see flying from one party to another is hilarious.
Hmm.
Now, the funny part there is how politicians are. If you look at things happening in our country or in the world, there are several things which are funny in a way that you would say that you would not expect something from a person like that. So presidents or prime ministers or people in authority say certain things which you're like, how could he or she say that?
Right, right.
That becomes the joke. They are not there. They are there to serve the people, but what they're doing in the end is just absolute opposite.
Hmm.
That is the joke. That is where I would say that a good satirist, a good cartoonist would look at those aspects and just hit the dart right there so that people get it. They
Hmm.
get the funny bit of it. And of course, in India today, it's very difficult to get away with jokes because people get offended very fast. ऐसे कैसे बोला, how could मोर्चा निकालो, ban this, ban that, ban culture चालू है. So I think we've lost a little bit of sense of humor somewhere. I really hope that it changes.
Yeah, yeah. And sir, any last piece of message for budding comic creators, or maybe someone who wants to be open-minded and be creative always?
Yeah, I'll use those two keywords right there: open-minded and creative. You have to be open-minded. And like I said, coming back to that question of yours about preset notions or how your mind works, never keep rigid ideas. So maybe tomorrow you might stand for something, but your client might want something else, and you might say, hey, wait, this probably doesn't work because I feel it should be this way, that way. But sometimes you have to strike a balance, what is required versus what you think. Like, for example, an actor might play a villain's role. He might be a good person in life, but he still has to play a villain's role because that's his job.
Hmm.
So always keep an open mind. Always observe. I would always say observation is very important, and practice. With practice, you get better, and you will see your style evolve over the years to come. So even today, when I look back at my work, which I've done, say about even 5-6 years ago, I see a drastic change in the way I draw some faces. Even the characters that I draw look different over time, and that happens. You look at any comic, even in the Western publishing, even Indian ones. See how Supandi has changed over the years. See how Tintin looked in the earlier comics versus later on Asterix as well. So your art style will change. It's always lovely to go back to your old stuff and see, oh, this is where I've changed. This is where your art has evolved. So keep observing, keep staying relevant is what I would say.
Right. Thank you so much, sir. That's a wonderful piece of advice, and the keyword is observation. as you said.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
and I think this conversation would definitely be helpful to a lot of people out there, and it would be definitely fun. And I would be say linking all the handles of Abhijeet sir. Do check out his content, and I would definitely recommend read Angry Maushi for sure. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us today and doing this episode with us. Really grateful for it.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you for having me. And please keep up the good work you are up to. And, maybe we will soon catch up again. And
Definitely.
maybe I would have a few questions to ask you the next time around.
Sure.
Cool.